Who are we? You sure you want to know?
I'm Peter,
And I'm Sean.
and we want to make it on our own steam.
I respect that. Welcome to So Much to Tell, a Raimi Spider-Man podcast, the Pizza Time edition.
We'll deliver your Sam Raimi Spider-Man podcast in 29 minutes, or you don't have to support us on Patreon.
I know to you, Peter, a promise means nothing, but to me, it's serious.
Serious to me too, Sean. But if you feel that strongly about it, why don't you start us off today? Because you have a topic in mind that I think you've been wondering about for a while.
Yes, I just keep having all these unanswered questions about these movies.
Hey.
And I think this is a fun topic as well. And it is, what is the work culture like for both the Daily Bugle and Oscorp? In other words, what is it like to be a worker at one of these businesses?
Terrible. Next question.
What? But is it though?
Okay. Let's interrogate the question.
I think that's what you've tuned in for, at least. So, yeah, I think, let's start with Oscorp, because overall, that's a smaller slice of everything than the Daily Bugle, which is there in all three movies. Whereas we really only get a glimpse of Oscorp in Spider-Man 1. And, oh boy, we talked a little bit about this in the Norman Osborn back-to-back episodes in season 1, but I think it's fair to say that Oscorp, both figuratively and literally, is a bit of a cutthroat environment, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you could ask Dr. Strom about that, but I mean, of course you can't because he's dead.
That's just it. First of all, it seems like Oscorp is a pretty big company, so I think a little bit of an asterisk that our glimpse into it is pretty limited, and it's entirely focused on Norman Osborn, who is the founder and CEO. And, if he's having a rough time, then I think it's fair to say that most of the rank and file employees are also having a rough time. They're all under tremendous pressure to get this formula, this super soldier serum developed for the Army, and to get this flight suit and glider developed as well. And nothing's going to schedule. Dr. Strom and Dr. Osborn are in open conflict over, where they are with the development of the formula. And yeah, there's just a lot of literal backstabbing, figurative backstabbing.
Now, do you think that leads to like a poor work culture all the way down, or do you think that's just like the higher ups dealing with their crap and that doesn't affect, the normal person like testing the glider and whatnot?
Maybe a little bit of both, because if you're just, somebody in the rank and file working at the much lower levels of everything, you're a little bit insulated from the machinations that go on between the board and the CEO and like the senior management. But if they're dysfunctional, I think that dysfunction definitely is going to trickle down in one way or another.
Well, eventually profits are up and costs are down. And, their stock has never been higher. I mean, if you've got part of your income comes from the stocks of Oscorp, you got to be feeling good at some point.
That's
again, unless you're Dr. Strom.
That's for the stockholders. And I think as we see, and you made this point, it's a very good point.
Thank you.
Uncle Ben gets laid off in the first movie, and that's because they were downsizing their workforce to upsize their profits. And so, high profits typically means, they're cutting costs in one way or another. And usually cutting your labor force is one of the first things you would try. So I don't know
what I actually come to think of it. I wonder if Norman, and he probably does, applies his same mentality about like power to his workers. He values people based on purely on their performance and their abilities and how they've proven himself to him, which makes sense for a boss. But also, I think, we see Norman not being too forgiving, even if his own son, when they don't live up to his high standards of what he expects from someone, they're out.
Yeah.
When you mention that about letting people go, he probably would be pretty cutthroat. It's probably terrifying whenever performance reviews, roll around at Oscorp.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and obviously the movies don't explore any of this in much detail at all, but it's interesting just kind of the business transactions that occur with Oscorp because, at the very beginning of the first movie, Norman makes that comment, well, if we don't get this Army contract, Oscorp, or I guess if they lose the contract, more accurately, if they lose it, Oscorp will be dead. That's the downside of having the military as your main client because, they bring in a lot of money, but if you over-rely on one particular client and you don't diversify, well, that's the risk. If they withdraw their funding, give it to Quest, then Oscorp goes down the drain.
People often wonder, like, what Norman's plan is going to be after he's killed everybody he wants to kill and after he has removed and or acquired Spider-Man to his team. It makes me wonder now, like you said, like his business is war, essentially. Is he going to go off and like pull a Palpatine and like, orchestrate all these conflicts out in the world, maybe like using his Green Goblin persona and just kick off a bunch of different wars and, make sure Oscorp is put on the map in big business with its weapons department.
Yeah. I guess we're getting a little bit beyond the workplace culture itself. We're getting into more.
I mean, business would really be up if he could like orchestrate like 20 different conflicts the U.S. had to be in.
Yeah. Suffice to say, I think, with Norman Osborn at the helm, I would imagine it's a pretty tough place to work. It seems like it's a very stressful, just very unstable environment. Just even without the Goblin Serum, even without those enhancements, I think it's safe to say Norman was not a particularly easy boss to deal with.
He's an intense individual, it seems. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, very smart and obviously very ambitious. He built this company.
He started this company.
And, we know how much he sacrificed. So he's clearly a very driven, a very motivated individual. Mm-hmm. And intense is a good word for it. I think having him as your boss, even under the best of circumstances, I think would be very, very stressful, would be very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he sets very high standards.
Yep.
And again, that's not inherently a bad thing. But I also think it doesn't take much for him to want to get rid of you.
It's very stressful. I have to assume.
Yeah. I think workplace culture, in a lot of ways, does reflect what's going on at the top.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying that I will clean up for this show, but it's crap rolls downhill.
Mm.
And I think about that a lot in the context of, the workforce, because if the senior managers are stressed out, then they take out their stress on the middle management, and then they take it out on the rank and file workers. I guess my point is, if Norman is stressed and lashing out and getting angry at Dr. Strom, even before he has his body and DNA permanently altered,
you're right.
Then, I can imagine that Oscorp is a very difficult place to work.
I mean, you do not want your boss, no matter what your profession is, to turn around at you in front of the board and hiss at you under his breath, "Back to formula," like he did. I mean, that not great.
I mean, no, but also to be fair, Norman, I think he can turn on the charm when he needs to, or at least his version of charm. I think that's something that a senior manager, a CEO would have to do at some point. You can't just be all intense, angry all the time. Sometimes you have to be a little bit more slick, a little bit more, personable, affable.
So would you want to work for him?
No, at least not directly.
Yeah.
I would maybe want to have like some level of management in between me and Norman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Working directly for him, I don't think that would be a good idea. But I do think a company like that is going to draw somewhat ambitious and intelligent people as well. They're working on weapons and inventions that are at the cutting edge, again, literally, of technology.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think maybe also the culture is worsened by just the kind of people that might have been attracted to work there in the first place. And on that note, I would say Dr. Strom seems a little bit
out of his
element. Yeah, out of his element, to, again, no pun intended, because he seems to have a little bit more of a conscience and he's a little bit more meek.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't seem to fit in as well with the more cutthroat, get things done at any cost mindset that Norman and some of the other managers, like we talked about in our Oscorp Oracle episodes, the board, they have no problem kicking Norman to the curb,
right,
when it gets in the way of them making a ton of money.
Yeah, Mendelstrom's kind of an older guy too, and I can sort of maybe even imagine that like he and Norman have worked together for quite a while, and maybe that's why
Yeah.
he is sort of in that position he's in, working closely with him. I could maybe almost imagine that like over the years, that like meeker, more cautious version of him, probably like did help balance out Norman in different circumstances, and it probably would have come in handy in this instance too, so that he didn't become the Green Goblin. But obviously, things were on the line. It was probably the most close to disaster that
Yeah.
Oscorp had come. And yeah, once he was the Green Goblin, he was more than willing to let Mr. Strom go. But interesting sort of relationship they have there.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thought. That Strom and Norman were there from the beginning, when the company was, in its infancy, when it was just a
little baby company.
Mm-hmm. Like a fledgling young startup.
Just a hot dog shop, just a simple hot dog shop on the streets of New York.
And then it got bigger and bigger, and to have that company get so large within Norman's own lifetime is pretty remarkable.
Oh yeah.
And so maybe that also affected things. He got a little conceited, he got a little cocky, a lot of hubris.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that crept into his thinking, at least a little bit. Norman's thinking that he could do no wrong, that
too big
things
to
would
fail,
always go his way,
as we used to say over here in our Earth.
Exactly.
Well, now that brings us to maybe a different company here, and oh boy, that's the phone again. It sounds like Mr. Jameson's mad that our freelance photography gig isn't enough for us to pay for our phone bill. So,
well, that sounds like a problem for another day. Right now, I want to get to our spider survey.
Sure, that works for me, Sean. So, speaking of big businessmen running big companies, over on X, the site formerly known as Twitter, we asked people who they would rather work for, the J. Jonah Jameson of the Raimi-verse or the J. Jonah Jameson of the Watts world. And this was by far the most popular poll we've conducted, with 1,283 people participating.
Wow.
Democracy at work. I love democracy. And it was a blowout. It was an absolute blowout. 92.7% of people said they would rather work for the Sam Raimi Jameson rather than the Watts Jameson. And I think that makes sense to me. They both seem pretty snappy and snarky, and they don't tolerate fools very well, and they're not particularly patient with people. But we've seen more of the Raimi Jameson, and we know that he definitely at his core has like some real fundamental principles that he wants to uphold.
Oh yeah, no question.
We've seen those moments of him defending Peter from Norman. We've seen him forced to print a retraction when it comes down to it. If he has to, like, if he knows something is false, he doesn't want to say something that's knowingly false. I suppose in some ways, like, the stuff that he prints, we don't really see the content of it. Like, maybe inside it does offer like at least a sliver of somebody saying, well, maybe Spider-Man didn't do it, and that's enough to ease his conscience. Who knows? But he definitely runs a pretty tight ship, it seems.
Well, I think in the third movie is where we hear that the Daily Bugle was, I think, the eighth or ninth most popular newspaper in New York. So they were pretty far away from the top.
True.
And I'm sure that creates a tremendous pressure on the senior management once again, because they're hovering on the edge of bankruptcy. They're hovering on the edge of going out of business.
Interesting parallel. Again, I never thought about that. But yeah, they both got to do what they got to do to sell weapons or papers, depending. Yeah.
I think another thing too, and we're looking back at these movies with 20 years almost of time that has passed, and these movies are set in the early 2000s, and since then, I think it's no secret, and it's been very well documented, that the newspaper business is almost on life support across the board right now.
There's a web version too. I noticed, at least by Spider-Man 3, underneath the masthead, it does say like dailybugle.com. So perhaps they've got an online version as well.
I'm sure they do, and I'm sure in universe, assuming that technology developed the same way it did in ours, that, yeah, they would have tried to make some, their online presence maybe, over the years migrate to that as the primary product. Assuming that the Daily Bugle has been able to survive and continue amidst these technological changes. I think still it's, even without all of that pressure, it's just a competitive business, especially being in New York City, home of so many other publications and newspapers and journals that it's probably harder to stand out amongst the crowd.
Also pretty cutthroat, yeah.
And you're right that they tried to differentiate themselves by offering essential, well, not essentially, he literally says it in the one movie, exclusive Daily Bugle photos. So they try to separate themselves from the crowd by having this unique way to keep up with Spider-Man. It seems to work out pretty well for them. I mean, they say, they sold every copy of a couple of their printings.
I mean, it's apparently powerful enough to turn the whole city against Spider-Man in Spider-Man 2. So enough people are reading it, at least by Spider-Man 2. And maybe that's why it wasn't doing so well in Spider-Man 3, because, New York kind of loves him by that point, but the Daily Bugle's still holding on to that, like, Spider-Man, the menace. And people just don't want that news.
If Jameson is so worried about slander or libel because that's printed, how could he print headlines where he's talking about, Spider-Man caused that wreck or he caused that robbery, or I don't know. Like, it seems like that's stuff
maybe there's just like a sliver of like one sentence inside the article itself that's like, well, maybe he didn't, like, one of the other side, like one person giving the other side of the opinion. That's
probably true, but it seems like it's more of like an opinion piece than anything else. It seems like they publish these photos.
Maybe it is actually under the opinion piece. I mean, you could probably say whatever you want under the opinion section.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I would imagine that most of this comes from the opinion pages, but in any event, they see, it's clear that they focus and they rely on Spider-Man to generate sales and to generate circulation for that newspaper. And it works pretty well.
Yeah.
Although it's interesting that even by the third movie, they're still not, even close to the top of the publications that are being circulated in New York City. That's what I'm saying,
because people don't want to hear that news anymore. They might be...
Maybe.
He's a popular item. He's a popular Halloween item by Spider-Man 3.
But I never got the sense that the paper improved its standing all that much in the three movies. It seems like they're roughly in the same place in the competition, all three movies. Even though they sell out every copy, they're still not moving ahead to like, 6th, 5th, or even 3rd, 2nd, or 1st place among the newspapers.
Hoffman's just doing a bad job. But that's the thing. Jameson is very loyal. I mean, that's a difference between Norman and Jameson. Like, Jameson definitely values his employees. I mean, he is willing to like fire Peter like that, but like almost in a way that like, he can unfire you like 2 seconds later. We see the same group of people, Betty, Robbie, Hoffman, they're there constantly. So like he's very loyal to the people around him.
Is it, well, okay, let me give you a different spin on that. Is it that Mr. Jameson's loyal, or is it just that he can't attract, the top tier talent to his newspaper? Because think about it, they have to hire a photographer, of the likes of Eddie Brock.
Maybe. I mean, it does make you wonder why he specifically wants to work for the Daily Bugle of all places. I mean, he has this spiel about like wanting to work with the greatest newspaper man of all time, J. Jonah Jameson, but they're toward the bottom of the rung by that time in terms of the top selling papers. So yeah, maybe that is just what he's been reduced to. Interesting.
That's kind of how I see it. I think maybe part of it's loyalty, but also part of it, I imagine, is just that they can't really attract and recruit the elite journalists. And
Hoffman definitely doesn't come across as particularly elite, although he did come up with the name Doc Ock. He did give us Dr. Octopus. So
well, I get the sense that
he also gave us Science Squid too, though. So
yeah. So I don't know. I don't think the Daily Bugle is a particularly successful publication, but they seem to at least be able to survive because, they have Spider-Man to sort of rely on.
So would you rather work there?
Versus Oscorp?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I would choose either of them. I mean,
okay, well,
because the Daily Bugle, well, I'm sorry, but it's just Mr.
So
Jameson's...
it sounds like they're both terrible, which is what I said at the start. We didn't have to do this whole episode. I would have saved us a whole episode of time.
I guess Daily Bugle is maybe the lesser of two evils. because, they're not making weapons. They're not making things that are
True.
literally designed to harm people. They're just spreading ideas that harm one particular person.
The power of the
but,
words, though, Sean.
The pen is mightier than the sword.
Precisely.
Yes. So, yeah, I think that's... But so I guess that's why if I had to choose, I would probably choose the Daily Bugle.
Because it does seem like a pretty hectic workplace as well. They're constantly down to the wire. Like 5 minutes of deadline, Jonah. We need our page one. We double booked, ads for this page. Like constantly running into problems at the
that's
last
another
second.
thing. It's like their ad department can't get its act together. They're double booking pages.
That's Hoffman for you.
They're having a hard time attracting good photographers. Their journalists, their actual news part of the business seems pretty de-emphasized. It seems like opinion and photography take precedence over the actual news.
Mm-hmm.
So
pictures of Julia Roberts in a thong.
Yeah, it's they're just selling sensationalist drivel for the most part. So I don't know if I would like that either. Because it feels like you're not really there to report the truth. They're not exposing corruption at City Hall or anything. They're there to just try to make a mountain out of a molehill, it seems.
Spider-Man should hire you as his PR guy.
Yeah, two not great options, but I think the Daily Bugle is the less not great option of the two.
Well, having explored Jameson in that regard, we're going to follow him a little bit further at this point when we go into the Memeverse to explore a little template that I like to call Blank Was a Hero. That sound good to you, Sean? You ready to move on? Is that okay?
I think so. We're already over. Speaking of bad bosses, I know Mr. Aziz is probably going to be pretty steamed that we're over the time limit again. So.
I know. Well, maybe we can sneak in the back way. Mr. Aziz won't realize we were gone.
Well, we're trying to do better.
Well, we sure are. But for this moment right now, we're serving up a steaming fine specimen of a meme from when Spider-Man is no more and J. Jonah Jameson laments driving him away. He looks up at Spidey's costume and says, "Spider-Man was a hero. I just couldn't see it." And so, in this meme, you replace Spider-Man and his costume with whatever you want to say was maligned, only to later realize that it was actually, good or helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen this meme before, Sean?
I think a couple of times, but definitely not as much as the one we discussed in the previous episode of the glasses. So I would say I've seen it a little bit more sparingly.
Well, seeing something sparingly is not major at this university, Sean. So I'll give you a couple examples. But there will be something we need from you in just a moment, okay? So hang tight there.
Okay.
All right. So sometimes there's a turnaround in this meme as well. Like, at first it says something was a hero, and then you go back on what you just said, and you say, actually, it was a menace, a criminal. Like in this popular example posted by Raimi memer Matt Loves Hollywood that I just sent you. I feel like I see this roll around every Pride Month, and we see Jameson representing corporations saying, "The gay community was a hero. I just couldn't see it." Just in time for that attitude to evaporate on July 1st. And this, at least at the time of this recording, is in like the top Raimi memes of all time. I think it's like 22 or something like that. It's within like the top 30 most upvoted Raimi memes right here. So sterling example of
I did not know that there was even a ranking of these memes.
You've got much to learn, my friend. Now, next, frankly, I'm not sure this meme posted by David Bowie Guy 69 is necessarily exemplary of the format, but I thought it was funny. And you'll see it here. I am also sending it to you right now. It's Peter telling the kid who saw him do a flip in Spider-Man 2, work hard, work out, get plenty of rest, eat your green vegetables. And then the kid realizes that his mom was right, and he didn't believe her. And it shows him as Jameson saying, "Mom was a hero. I just couldn't see it." Good stuff. Maybe not quite as funny hearing it in audio format. Maybe there's a slight depreciation in the humor levels, but probably nothing noticeable for our podcast audience.
I think it's funny. I think it's pretty clever.
That's good. Lastly, here's the one that we've all been waiting for. If you've been waiting for any at all, it's probably been this one. Posted by Redditor Week Wrecker, and echoing the same sentiment by Rorschach Blyat, that there's a popular line from the Dark Knight, spoken by Mr. Ledger's Joker, that in their last moments, people show you who they really are. And of course, based on this famous confrontation with the Goblin that Jameson has, this meme purports that Jameson was a hero. We just couldn't see it.
Interesting. That's kind of that's a very good meta example.
Mm-hmm. And now here's where you come in, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, old pal, I want to know 3 or 4 things that you thought were a menace, but were actually a hero. You just couldn't see it.
Like in my whole life, or within like the Spider-Man movies?
No, with anything. Within your whole life, within the movies, anything. People, places, things, anything. And I have thought up 3 things that I think you might say. And I want to see if I'm right about any of them. Now, while you're thinking up some things, in the interest of fairness and drama, I'm going to say those 3 things that I've guessed to the fine folks listening, and I'm going to mute the mic so you won't be able to hear, okay?
Okay.
Okay, ready, folks? It's just you and me. All right. The things I think Sean might pick are Andrew Garfield, Peter Jackson, and brutalist architecture. All right, you got that? Okay, let's see what Sean has to say. Okay, Sean, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah. Loud and clear.
All right, we're back. So, have you thought of anything that you think was a hero, but you just couldn't see it before?
So, okay. Yes, I have. So one would be, vinegar.
Oh, okay.
Because when I was a kid, I hated vinegar. I hated the smell of it. I dreaded Easter time because that meant having to paint Easter eggs with that vinegar-based dye.
Wow. Okay.
So I hated it. Couldn't stand the smell.
Cleaning the Keurig. I know you hated that.
Yeah. And it's that still does not smell pleasant. But anyway, I have since learned, just from cooking and making different things over the years, vinegar is an incredibly important. I mean, I knew it all along, but now that I cook a lot more myself, I realize, vinegar is, such a versatile, important ingredient that is responsible for a lot of delicious flavors and a lot of delicious recipes. So that would definitely be one.
Growing up is realizing vinegar is a hero. You just couldn't see it.
It's a kitchen hero.
You're right. Well, that is not one that I thought. So, all right. So I failed on that one, but that is a great choice. What else you got?
I would say Jaromir Jagr, the hockey player.
Okay, sure.
Because, that's an interesting one for me because I have always been a big Pittsburgh Penguins fan.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was, a kid in the 90s, after Mario Lemieux was briefly retired, Jaromir Jagr was the main player and the leader of the team. And objectively, he's one of the best NHL players of all time. But he left the team in 2001 on pretty bad terms. It was a very, very messy divorce. And for many years after that, when Jagr came back to Pittsburgh playing with different teams, the fan base here greeted him with much hostility. But just a few weeks ago, the Penguins retired his jersey. All of the fences were mended. The hatchets were buried. And, Jagr, all of the while, he's always been a great and dedicated elite level hockey player. And I think for a while here in Pittsburgh, we fans just couldn't see that. We couldn't get past the anger and the hate. So that would be my second example. Jaromir Jagr.
Okay. That's another good one. And I did not get that. Give me 1 or 2 more tries here, Sean.
Okay.
Good choices, though. Good choices.
Okay. Having a backyard.
Dang. Okay.
Because it's something that I think it's not that I never appreciated it or I disliked it. It was just something that I took for granted. And especially in the summertime, not having a yard to go out and enjoy the nice weather in is, it really sucks, for lack of a better term. So having just moved to a new house with a much nicer backyard, that's something I definitely appreciate now, and I'll never take it for granted again.
Well, having a backyard was a hero. You just couldn't see it. Give me one more, Sean, because I thought I had some 3 pretty good ones here, and I have not gotten a single one.
Okay.
Just shows how much I thought I knew you.
Last but not least, I'll say Ringo Starr.
Son of a gun. Okay, please explain.
Because, yeah, I'm a big Beatles fan as well. I know all of their albums pretty well. I've listened to pretty much every song the band has ever recorded. I mean, I'm not like a total expert, but I think I'm pretty well versed in them. But I think when people first get into the band, there's a tendency to sort of ignore Ringo, for lack of a better term.
The silent Beatle, right?
Well, that was actually the nickname they had for George.
Never mind. Shows how much I know about the Beatles as well.
But I think Ringo, he's kind of dismissed as, oh, he was just the drummer. And I think partly it's because he didn't really write many of the songs. He only wrote 2 songs by himself on the whole discography, Don't Pass Me By and Octopus's Garden, both of which come much later in their career in 1968 and 69, respectively. People dismiss him as kind of the least necessary member of the band. Like, oh, he was just the drummer. He wasn't writing all the hit songs. He wasn't the one coming up with the very memorable lyrics. He just was kind of the, more or less like a tool to use in furtherance of those things.
He was the Staten Island of the Beatles.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, that's an interesting comparison.
With no offense intended to Staten Island.
Well, and I think he's a lot more important to the band than people give him credit for. And I think they definitely liked and needed and were a better band because they had Ringo Starr. And I think he gets kind of overlooked. And I think he's just a Beatle that, you don't appreciate as much until you start to learn more and look more into their story. Yeah. Well, anyway, Ringo.
Great choice.
So what is that? Vinegar, Ringo Starr,
a backyard,
backyards, and
Yarmir Yager.
Yarmir Yager.
Yeah.
So those are my 4 things.
4 good ones that were heroes. You just couldn't see it. Okay. Well, what I thought, and there is a little bit of a Beatles connection here. I thought, for one, you might say Peter Jackson, because I know you have a certain distaste for a certain series of films he made set in a far-off imaginary land. But then he became sort of instrumental to documenting the history of the Beatles and providing us with a brand new Beatles song in our lifetime, which I know is a very nice thing. So
I'll give you partial credit for that, because that
Thank you.
Beatle related. So
somehow
I'll give you
connected
half
to the
credit.
Beatles. Okay, I'll take it. I'll take the
I'll give you
half
half credit.
I'll take it. One of my suggestions was Andrew Garfield, which is a popular sentiment that was floating around, during No Way Home's release as well. There were a lot of memes about that in various formats. I remember you saying you appreciated him so much more after No Way Home.
I do, but I guess what I take issue with is that, the meme format says he was a hero all along. I just couldn't see it. And I think that's where I have to disagree, because I'm not saying that makes, because that implies that those movies were really good. We just didn't.
Or maybe it just implies that he was really good in them and we weren't able to see it.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. That one, sorry.
Okay, I didn't get that one.
I don't know.
And
nope.
Last but not least, by any stretch, I said Sean was for sure going to say brutalist architecture.
No. It is objectively ugly. Interesting, yes, but again, I would say
you said you were going to pick it. You were going to pick a brutalist building in one of our season 1 episodes. You talked about how ugly it was, and you're like, yeah, but I would, at the same time, I would want one. I was like, are you kidding me?
Well, I would pick it over the other styles that we were comparing it to in that particular episode, but
okay, because ugly but memorable is, I think, what you had said.
Yeah, but that's not really good. I mean, it's memorable because it's so bad.
Ugly and proud. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, okay. So I got like half a point. And you know what? I'm willing to take that because we had fun. And that's the most important thing.
Everybody's a winner.
Everybody's a winner. So everybody, thanks for hanging out with us for So Much to Tell Pizza Time.
If you're in the neighborhood, You can take 2 buses and a cab to visit us on social media. We're on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, X.
That's right.
All the usual suspects.
The usual suspects. And you can visit us on Patreon, where you can find our bonus shows, Too Much to Tell, and our animated Spider-Man watch-through series, and help support So Much to Tell.
Because right now, all we got is this 20 for the rest of the week.
So true. So until next time,
Godspeed, Spider fans.
Mr. Aziz is going to kill us.